Good morning, everyone. My name is Greg Lolley. We're here on Mayim Farm. We're going to be talking to you a little bit more today in this segment about working with nature and not against her, and how to use the laws and the processes that are already happening in our gardens and in our farms, on our farms, and in our areas where we want to grow things. There was another video, earlier segment that you might want to check out. This will be just a continuation of that. So some of the stuff we're going to talk about today, we're going into a little bit more detail of the soil biology and how to get that indigenous microbiology into our gardens and into our farms, and how to use that and bring it into those areas. And we're going to talk a little bit more further about aromatic herbs and aromatic plants that can be utilized in your garden to give us good effects. And we're going to talk a little bit more depth about wicking beds. Wicking beds are a great way to have a bed that doesn't require quite as much attention for water, and are easy to use in a lot of different areas, like a patio or a backyard, something like that, where you don't have a whole lot of space. And so they're really good and cheap to make, and we'll get right with it. And speaking of the biology, were you aware that up to 85% of the proteins, carbohydrates, amino acids, all the things that the plant produces for its own energy, it takes up to 85% of that and puts it down into the soil and pushes that out as exudates. In other words, it exudes those sugars and proteins and amino acids down into the soil. And what they're doing is they're actually feeding that biology that's in the soil. So this plant is in control of what's going on in its in and around its root system. There are actually biology that have a relationship with those roots, and that plant is actually feeding that biology with these exudates that are being pushed out into the soil. And why in the world would the plant even do that? Well, the reason why is because those organisms they have a symbiotic relationship with that plant. In other words, that plant may need, say it might need boron today. It only needs just a micro amount of it today, but it has to have that little bit of boron, and there's no boron around that root. And so if that plant can't get that boron right there around that root, what is it to do? Well, it actually can put out an exudate that has a relationship with another bacteria or fungi or some other arthropod or some part of the soil food web that would go out and utilize that boron and bring it back to that plant. And the way it does that, the plant is feeding the biology, but the biology needs these minerals and these other micronutrients, that it needs those to actually build their bodies. So what happens is these exudates are put out, and this biology is growing and producing these micronutrients that when it dies and goes through its life cycle, guess what? It becomes a little manure pack. In other words, it has a little bit of nitrogen, it has a little bit of boron, it has a little bit of whatever it is that plant needed. It's in control of what it sends out into that soil to be able to actually get what it needs. Now, that is a revelation to most people, and it was to me when I first learned it. But it's a way to think of things, that this biology is very, very important. And so they need these organisms to actually thrive and to grow. So there's a real important thing to think about is keeping that biology as happy as we possibly can. And I'm going to show you a couple of ways that I do it here today, a little bit later on. But there's something to be said for keeping the biology as happy as they possibly can be. I heard somebody say one time that if you farm this way and you're thinking things this way, that you're actually you're hurting animals, but you're hurting little bitty microscopic animals. In other words, you're a micro herder. So you would actually be trying to bring these microorganisms into your garden so that they can help your plants. And if we take actions and we have impacts on this biology, then we can hurt our own selves and we can hurt our plants. These plants can produce these second and third stage metabolites that can actually be the medicine that we need or the nutrients that we need in our diet. And if they don't have that microbiology to do that, to produce those metabolites, then we're not getting the full nutrition out of that plant that would be our medicine or would be our food. This right here is a plant that I'm working with. I've only have a couple of them so far, but it's called a blue wild indigo. So it's a native plant that's from around here and makes some beautiful blue flowers. But it also has a couple of different functions. It also fixes nitrogen in your soil. So you can have these plants planted along with your other plants, and they will actually supply nitrogen to the plants that you're trying to grow, like your vegetables or whatever. So this is called a blue wild indigo. I'm going to walk down here into the woods a little ways and show you what I'm talking about when I'm talking about the bacteria and fungi. One of the things that I do is I try to bring in some of the native bacteria and fungi that exist on my place. So I'm just walking in the woods down below where my tunnel house is here, and I've got a bucket here positioned, and what I'm going to actually do is I'm just going to take and kind of pull back some of this leaf litter here and let you see what I'm talking about. So what I would do is just bring this back a little bit, these leaves. And you know, nature is making its own compost here, and you see that layer of material there. That right there has little filaments. I don't know if you can see them, but they're little white filaments that are in there. And that actually is the biology. That is the fungi that are actually breaking down these leaves. So this right here is actually the mat that it's done from all these leaves that have fallen. But you see all these roots are just all through these leaves here. And if you look right over here, here's another spot that I pulled them out, and you can see it even better on that. See if I can get it there. If you can see those white things right there, those little filaments, those are actually the biology that I'm talking about, the fungi. They are the ones that are the good guys. So if we bring in compost or whatever you might bring in to put in your garden, or you might be a bagged soil or something like that, those soils will not have these fungi that are native to your area. So what we want to do is we want to take and we want to bring in these native ones that are right here on our place and around our place, so that they're already acclimated to our area. So we want to bring some of those in. So what I would do is I would take my little trowel and I'd go in here and I would get me some of that stuff like that right there, and then I would take that and just pull me up some, put it in my bucket, and then what I would do is take, when I got to my bed over there, because all this stuff is going on here, you see like that right there, it's decomposing, it's so light and feathery, but taking these I guess you'd call them samples or whatever, or inoculant really would be the proper word for it. You see all those roots right there, they have that mycelium, which is the little filaments running all through it. So what I would do is take that, and then I would just take that to my bed, and then I would just incorporate that into my bed, because these bacteria and fungi that you're getting that come from the big box store or from somebody else's compost pile, or if you're doing your own compost pile, that's good. You can take this right here and actually put it into your compost pile and inoculate your compost pile. So if you're bringing in compost, this would be a great thing to do, and I'll show you a little bit more of that a little bit later on, how I put it into my beds. This is a wicking bed that's in a half barrel that's split horizontally, but inside this barrel there actually is some pop bottles, and there's a piece of pipe that runs down through the middle of it. And basically what happens is I put water in here, in this area here, and it goes down into the pipe and fills up at the bottom. It has a hole on the end that when it gets full it runs out, but that allows you to have water in the bottom of the container that you're growing in, and also allows you to have air down below it, so your hole is just below the surface of where the soil is, so you still have oxygen to your roots. But anyway, I've got my bucket of material that I collected down in the woods, and all I'm going to do is just kind of dig me out a little space there, and I'm just going to kind of jiggle it around in there and put some of that soil here and there, and I'll probably just go over here and just bury this down in here, because basically all I'm doing is inoculating this bed with some of that bacteria and biology and fungi that I collected down in the woods a while ago. So this would actually start growing that biology in my bed here, and it would already be acclimated to this area and would be just what I need in my bed. All right, we're going to talk a little bit more about wicking beds right now. So a wicking bed is basically a container of some kind that we would take and put some kind of a can or a plastic bottle or something along that line right there. I'm going to explain a little bit more to you about it, but I didn't come up with this design. It's been used by many people. There's a lot of people on YouTube that's put out a lot of good information on it, so this is just going to be like an overview. And if you want to research it more, I do use these, especially with people who may or may not be able to get out and are not as mobile as some of us are to get out in the garden and work. These can be used on in a patio or a back porch or something like that. They're small and easy to manage. It's easy to weed and things like that. And it's another one of those kind of things where you can place these near your path, like say right outside your kitchen or something on the back porch where you might have some herbs that you would use cooking that you could harvest real fast and real fresh. Remember, I talked a little bit more about having these type of things that are used very often near where they're used the most. So these work good for that. What we have here is we have a container. It can be a plastic trash can. It can be, this is a cattle mineral bucket barrel. It's about probably 30 gallons, something like that. So somewhere in that neighborhood, so you have plenty of soil in there. But basically what we're doing, we're putting something in the bottom of this barrel to take up the space, so that whenever the water fills up, it fills up into these jugs, and then it is absorbed into that material that your substrate, whatever it is you're growing in, down in this barrel. It's going to soak up into that and pull this moisture out into it. And as it does that, then it also by vacuum pulls air down into the soil and down into this space that's going to be left as this water goes down and level. It will replace that water with air, so you're actually pulling oxygen down through the soil, which is something that roots have to have, and it makes your plants grow a whole lot better. And you can actually put, if you want to put fertilizer down in here, a liquid fertilizer or something like that, you can do that. You can put that fertilizer in there. But what we're doing, we take these jugs like this right here. We would take a small drill bit and say it's about 1/8 of an inch. We'd just drill a few holes in there like that. I'd say probably 8 or 10 in a jug or whatever, because what we want to do is have this water to flow out into that soil that's down inside your container. Now you can use a metal can, do the same thing with a metal can, as long as it has a top and a bottom on it, and you're just going to put holes in it, and then water is going to go down into that and create this reservoir down in here. It can be any kind of a jug, like say a juice jug or something like that. These are just normal household things that would go into the landfill. So let's take them and let's try to use some of those and to our advantage. Now you can use, if you have access to it, there is something called a split pipe. This is an irrigation pipe. It's 6 inches. And it has little slots cut in these ridges here so water can flow in and out of this material. So it's a little bit more expensive. You have to go down to the big box store or whatever and buy this stuff, but that's one option. That if you want to be a little bit more technical with it, you can. You would need to take and wrap some kind of a weed block material or some kind of a material that you would put over the end of it to keep the soil from going up in here, because you want that to be an open space for water and air to be. So you can use it that way. Like I say, you can use any of these different kinds of jugs, whether they're white or clear or whatever, but you're going to drill holes in every one of these jugs. Now in one of these jugs also, we're going to take this lid off, and we're going to have our holes in here and everything, but we're going to take this pipe. This is a 1-inch PVC pipe, and I like to use 1-inch PVC because of the fact that I can take the end of a water hose without anything on the end of it and stick it right down in there, so I don't have to worry about it coming out. I can put about 4 or 5 inches down in there, let it start filling up, and then I can go on about my business, and then I can come back and check on it when it gets full. But anyway, this pipe is going to go right down in this hole so that you can take and have a place for your pipe to sit. So it would fill up this jug first, and then it would start going out into the rest of the and I'm just going to take that top off and leave it off. So we have our jugs down in the bottom, and now if you notice here, let me get you a little bit down there. Okay, you notice that there's spaces in between these jugs, and what's going to happen is that the material that you put in there for your soil, it's going to go down in there and it's going to fill up in these areas around these jugs, and then as this water level goes up, it will actually soak up. So a lot of plants don't like to have their feet wet, so to speak, but this allows them to get oxygen. So what they don't like is the lack of oxygen, not so much as the water, but it's the lack of oxygen. And so you have anaerobic things going on there, and generally anaerobic things are where pathogens go. But if you have oxygen, then you don't have the pathogens like you do in an anaerobic environment. You want an aerobic environment for your roots. So what we would do, we would take and drill these holes in each one of these, and then we would put our water into our pipe, and it would fill up to a certain point. And what we're going to do, we're going to take our drill and we're going to put our other bit on there, which is about a 1/2 inch bit. This one was about 1/8 of an inch, or you can actually even use, if you want to, if you have a ice pick or something like that, you could actually punch holes in the pipe or in the jug with your ice pick. Now I've got a drill bit. It's about 5/16, something like that. It's not really that important. You just don't want the soil to come out of the hole. So you don't want to make it too big, but you want to make it big enough where whenever it fills up, you can watch and see as the water level gets up to this point where I'm going to drill this hole, you know that it's full. So what we're going to do, we're going to kind of measure on one of our jugs here, about how high, and we want to leave a little bit of space here in our jug for air. Even if we have the water totally full in the barrel, we want to leave a little bit of space here. So what we're going to do, we're going to make a measurement, and we're going to look at our side of our tub here, and I measured it, so I'm just going to drill a hole right here. So that's all I got to do is just drill a hole right there, and if you notice, it's about at that shoulder level of the jug there. So we're going to leave a little bit of space for air there, and as the water fills up, there's still going to be a little bit of airspace there. But as the water gets used, it'll keep going down, and more airspace will be in here. So one of the key things is having that airspace in there and having that oxygen to be able to get down into that soil. Now generally it will not make the soil wet on top. If it does, then you're having a little bit too much of a wicking, so you can just add a little bit more soil and bring it on up to the top if you want to. But generally you don't have a whole lot of problems with that kind of thing because it won't go up any further than maybe a few inches normally. So it's a good way to do things, easy to make, on the cheap. So maybe this will help you in an area where you don't have a lot of space and you want to grow things, like I say, for your herbs and things on the back porch or in the patio. So that's a wicking bed. One thing I want to point out about this pipe is that if you notice, I have this cut at a 45-degree angle or some angle, so that whenever the pipe is sitting down into the jug, that it doesn't block it off. If I have it flat like this, it bottoms out and keeps the water from coming out on the other end. So we want this end to be the top, and we want to have this end cut at maybe a 45-degree angle or so that whenever this is sitting on the bottom, that it actually can flow out into the jug. The example of a wicking bed, this is a bed of lettuce, and has some arugula on the side here, and also on the other end here we've got some little watermelons that are on a trellis that go out that way. Here's another example of a companion planting. We have some deal here in the middle here, and if you know anything about landscaping, I guess you would call this the thriller and the filler. We have some tomatoes here, and then we also have spillanthus. I don't know if you've ever heard of spillanthus, but it is called the toothache plant. Real pretty flower, good medicinal plant. And then these are in a wicking bed. Another thing that we always want to remember is that it doesn't matter whether it's a conventional pesticide, herbicide, fungicide, whatever side it is, whether it be conventional or organic, they're all indiscriminate killers. In other words, they kill the good guys along with the bad guys. So that's one thing that we don't really, haven't in the past most times, taken into consideration, that you're not only killing the pests that you're having a problem with, that you're actually killing the good guys that are helping you also. So there's a point in time where we have to make that decision. Okay, is the pest pressure high enough? So what we try to do is, if we have to have a pesticide, herbicide, fungicide, whatever it is, to be able to save the crop, there's a point in time where if I don't do something and intervene, I could lose the whole crop and I don't have any food to eat. So I have to make a decision. Okay, I'm going to use some of these things, but I'm going to use them in a manner that would be the least amount of impact to the good guys that I have in the soil. Generally, they come back quickly if you give them the environment to come back. But if we continue to use them indiscriminately, then it has a very detrimental effect on the biology in the soil. One of the things that is tillage. I mean, tillage is a good thing to get rid of weeds and everything, and we all know that. But also, whenever we're doing that, we're slicing and dicing all those trillions, even in 1 square inch of soil, there's trillions of bacteria, fungi, arthropods, all kinds of different animals and insects that are present there in that soil, and they have a very good relationship with the majority of the plants that you have. So it's something we need to keep in mind whenever we're going to use something like that. I'm not saying that you can't use it. What I'm saying is that you use it to the minimal amount for what you need to get done. And then also behind that, I would try to make sure that my biology could recover from that as easy as possible. So there's things you can do to help that also. So we should always just keep that in mind, that they're indiscriminate killers. So we want to bring life, and we want to have food and medicine that brings life to us, but we can't really do that as long as we're going out and we're killing constantly. So that's another thing that we would want to keep in mind whenever we're doing our garden, is that anytime we intervene with any of these practices, is that they have an effect. And so we need to count the cost, and then if the cost is advisable, then we go ahead. But if it's not, and we can wait, and we can hand pick something off, or we can spray it with a water hose and knock them down, or we can do any of these things that are not so invasive to the biology and to the plants and what they're doing there, and those systems that I talk about that nature has going on, if we can use the least amount of intervention as possible, that would be the best route for us to take. Plant these aromatic plants around your garden, in your garden, and in the yard. It can be, as far as several hundred feet away. Is still going to have an effect. Like I say, everything is connected together. And so if you can take these aromatic plants and plant them around the peripheral of your garden, you're going to get some benefit from that, as far as not only the aesthetic benefit and the part where we could eat them or make medicine out of them or whatever, but they are a deterrent to some pests. So that is one thing that we can think of. Some of those plants that you could use inside the garden that would be an advantage would be something like a oregano, which would be a good herb to have in your garden. Thyme. We plant around our tomatoes, we plant basil in between every one of our tomatoes. Now, I don't have any actual scientific documentation, but I know I can tell that I have much less pressure from hornworms in areas where I have basil growing. So it appears like that the hornworms really don't like that basil being there. So they won't go down the road. If they do get on one, they won't basically decimate the whole row or whatever of tomatoes. They just don't spread like they normally would. Nasturtiums are another one we use a lot of. We sell them in the market. Everybody likes a pretty salad, and it has a lot of nutrients in it, and it makes a beautiful salad. So some of these flowers are edible, so generally we try to only plant flowers that are edible. So that way we get that being able to be a good food source for us also. There's another one called a viola, or a Johnny Jump Up. That's another one that's really good for your salads and doing a real pretty salad for your family. This is Jewels of Opar. A lot of people have never tried to use it for edible, but it is an edible, and it makes a great addition to your salad mix, and it makes some pretty flowers. These guys have already started to bloom a little bit, but they're kind of succulent. They have a lot of moisture in them, and they, like I say, they make a great mix to go in your salad. That's the Jewels of Opar. This is another bed here with some jewels of opar, small ones that just been planted about a week ago. And we have rosemary here, and of course the rosemary will be perennial in this bed. The jewels of opar will reseed, and we also have some nasturtiums here. So we're just trying to utilize all the space in this bed to get as much production out of the bed as we possibly can. That's jewels of opar and nasturtiums. I'm kneeling down here in another spot in the garden. I wanted to show you this right here. This is feverfew. It's another good medicinal plant. It has some beautiful flowers on it. It's a very aromatic plant. You would want to keep these around just for the aesthetic value of them, and also they're good medicine. I've actually used it to break fevers and stuff for me and my family. And let me swing on around here and I'll show you some verbena. This is a verbena that is growing here. Another great pollinator, another great medicinal plant to have in your garden. Good for a lot of different things. We also have over here some white horehound. This is white horehound right here. It has not begun to flower yet, but it'll be coming along pretty soon. When all these things get flowering out here, you can just walk around and just smell all the different kinds of smells and then try to identify them. Over there in the background we have the lemon bee balm. It's beginning to start to bloom. It's another one of those plants that's very, very medicinal, good for skin issues. It's good for a salad. It can be ate also. So there's a lot of these things that are out here in the medicinal plant garden that actually have stacked value. In other words, you can receive value from them as a medicinal plant. You can receive value from them as a food plant also. And plus you get the benefit of the pollinators, and you get the benefit of deterring pests in your garden. So you always want to have some of these peripheral aromatic type plants. And here's one of my wife's favorite, is lavender. Lavender is another one of those aromatic plants. It also has medicinal value also. So and it's real pretty too. Here's one of our perennial favorites. Well, it's not a perennial. It's a perennial favorite, but it's not a perennial. It actually is an annual, but it self-seeds. It's called lemon bee balm. I wish we had smell-o-vision, because I can just stand right here and you can see that bee working that plant right there. But they just smell wonderful, especially if you crush the leaf. It has that lemon smell. But I'm smelling all kinds of different things here this morning. It's a beautiful morning. Here's another one of those plants that sometimes just show up in your garden. They're native around here. Usually they're around places that have been disturbed or whatever. But it doesn't have a real beautiful flower, but it sends up a stalk like this right here. And from these seed is actually where you get psyllium. That is used a lot of times for digestive problems, and gives you a lot of fiber in your diet. So you can take these seeds and use them in your food. You can always tell plantain, because it'll have, see those veins there, it'll have 5 distinct, or maybe even 7, some of them, distinct veins inside that leaf. So it's very easy to distinguish. You see those veins there. But the seeds are the ones that we go after. And then also you can use plantain as a skin help. It can be made into a salve. It has a real thick leaf, and the old timers used to take it, and if they had a bruise, they would take and put plantain, or on any kind of skin malady, would take those and make a poultice out of them and put it on it for medicine. Here's a native plant that just showed up here. We did not plant this. It's called mullein, and it is actually a biennial type plant. It will shoot up this head on the second year, so it was here last year. so, and came back. But what was unusual about it that I wanted to show you, if I can zoom in on it a little bit, if you look right down in there, there's a cocoon for a butterfly. So a butterfly is going to be hatching out of there one day. That's one of the cool things about having all these things growing in the garden like this, is nature can do its thing, and we get to watch. And these are moringa trees. I don't know if you've ever heard of moringa, but moringa is a very, very good nutritional plant. It has a lot of nutrition in it. It has actually all 23 amino acids, which is very unusual in a plant, for any plant having that many amino acids. It also has about 40% protein. It has more vitamin D than milk, more vitamin C than orange juice. But this plant right here comes back every year from the root. You can probably see down here, you see the stump from last year that I just cut off. So they're tropical, so they don't live here through the winter, but they come back every year, and they'll make a tree about probably 25 to 30 feet tall by the time we get around to July and August. But we eat the leaves off of them. You take them and put it in a salad, or you can dry them and make a tea out of it and make a great green tea, especially with a little roselle hibiscus flowers to go along with it. But that's a moringa tree. Here's a tree that you probably, or some of you, are familiar with. It actually is an elderberry bush or elderberry tree. It's already got lots of elderberries on it, and this tree right here is about, actually it's 2 or 3 trees. I just stuck the sticks down in the ground and they root real easy. But these are some of the young ones there. But there's a reason why. I mean, it's good medicine, it's good food, and also it's another one of those kind of plants that has a lot of value other than just what's on the face value of it. There actually is a relationship between the root system of the elderberry tree and lots of good and beneficial bacteria and fungi. And so they serve as a host for when you do away with your garden and there's nothing there for the bacteria and fungi to live on, they can go live on the elderberry tree. So elderberry is another good one that you can put around in your yard, around in your garden, in the peripheral, that will give you many different functions and benefits by being there. That's elderberry, the common Sambucus canadensis, which is the common elderberry in the United States. But there's some of the flowers, or actually that's the berries right there, and a few flowers.
Hi, I'm James Curtin with the Natural Resource Conservation Service ACES program. The Natural Resource Conservation Service is an agency created through USDA to assist farmers, ranchers, and growers with conservation activity on their land and property. The ACES program was created to assist Natural Resource Conservation Service with delivery of their programs and activities through older workers' career centers. The Natural Resource Conservation Service provides funding and assistance to assist landowners with conservation activities such as fencing, cross fencing, watering trough, livestock, anything to do with livestock. Also, they provide funding to do with small growers on activities such as tunnel houses, garden, community type garden, and they also provide funding. They also help large growers with conservation practice such as cotton, corn, and peanut with the William B. Adams School to discuss and talk about different aspects of what NRCS does. We also provide education, training to also help producers become more familiar and more productive in the way that they carry on their business, and whether you're just getting started up or you've been farming for the last 20 years, we try to assist you and make your operation better